Good Monday morning, and thank you for watching Live Impact News here on 13 News Now Plus. My name is Eugene Daniel, and you are watching us live from our streaming studio in Hampton Roads, Virginia. Let's take a look here for you for a second here. I have producer Sarah Calloway here with me as we start off this new week, and meteorologist Craig Moeller. And let me tell you something. It may be cold outside, but in his heart today, it is warm and fuzzy because his Chicago Bears pulled off one of the most spectacular fourth quarter comebacks that I have never seen because I went to sleep on the game.
Yeah, you had to confess that you actually
I gave up on you guys
early. I'll tell you, the Bears have been doing it all season, these late last-minute comebacks. They've been so exciting to watch, and they pulled it off against the Packers. And for all of you Packers fans, don't hate on me, okay? You've had your run of many successes.
Give the Bears a chance
Give
for
Chicago
some success.
Our chance. Come on, baby. I don't have a cheese grater on set yet. I'm thinking about it.
I love to see it. And listen, we are going to get into some things here on the stream today. Mainly, the trial continues there in Uvalde on the former school police officer, Adrian Gonzalez, who has been accused of dozens of counts of not doing enough on that day in which a teenage gunman shot and killed 19 students and 2 adults. The attorneys in this case for Gonzalez have already tried to reach a mistrial. A judge has dismissed that so far, and we have been getting witness testimony. We'll be going to that at some point throughout this morning. Before we get into that, though, Craig, let's talk about this forecast. Man, it's like night and day between what we experienced just a few days ago.
Yep.
When we walked out of the building on Friday, it was spring.
It
felt like spring. Today, right back in the neck of winter.
Let's take a look at just how spring-like it felt last Friday and Saturday. Check this out. The highs over the last week, you can see 74 for the high on Friday. When you say it felt like spring, it literally felt like spring. Yeah, 75 on Saturday. Ridiculous, right? Our normal high is 51. So we were well above average as we went. We were above average really all of last week. We had a full week with temperatures above average. But Friday, Saturday in particular, and even yesterday morning early on, we had a high of 68. That took place after midnight. Temperatures did get a little cooler as we got into the early morning, but really the big drop came in temperatures later in the day on Sunday. And so far today, we've only mustered 39 degrees so far. So big difference there. Take a look at the temperature change from this time yesterday. And as I mentioned, again, the temperatures did fall back through the afternoon yesterday, so it's less and less dramatic now. Early this morning, when I was covering this for you on Daybreak, we had temperature drops 35, 37, 38 degrees down from yesterday morning at that time. So significantly colder over the last 24 hours. Temperatures right now, mid to upper 30s inland, upper 30s to near 40 at the coast. Now, it is going to warm up a little bit today because we've got all this sunshine across the area and the winds are going to pick up from the southwest a bit. We'll hit highs today in the upper 40s this afternoon. If you've got plans this evening, maybe you're going out to eat or you've got something on the books, just know that it's going to drop back down through the low 40s as we go past sunset. Now, we are clear, so just about full sunshine today. Futurecast, pretty straightforward, but I want to talk to you about kind of the bigger picture. So Sarah, if you want to take this full so folks can really get a good look at this, you can see this is the GFS, the Global Forecast System, or the U.S. model, okay, but it's technically, we refer to it as the GFS. This model here takes a look at kind of the extended outlook over the next 7 days or so. You can see how we have a chance for a few showers Wednesday afternoon back down to the south, along the Outer Banks and maybe eastern portions of North Carolina. As we get into Thursday, the GFS does produce a little wintry weather, or at least mix. I think we'll see some light rain showers mixing with or changing over to a little bit of wintry weather, at least briefly. So we want to give folks a heads up on that. That is something that we will be watching very, very carefully. Now, the European model does not bite on that, okay? They do not produce that, the snowy weather there. They keep us pretty dry on on Thursday, but as we go beyond that, the Euro actually does produce a little bit of snow, at least a chance for that on Sunday. As far as potential outputs, you can see the NAM model there. That is a higher resolution model. It's producing a little bit there on Thursday for Virginia Beach. The GFS still producing the most across the region, and this is all very light. But I just want to give folks a heads up. These models are at least saying, hey, stay alert. Not only could you possibly see some light rain showers, but maybe a little bit of snow trying to mix in briefly. So some minor accumulations, if the GFS is correct, up around Tappahannock or West Point, Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula over to the Eastern Shore. Not totally out of the question. The Euro does keep us dry. So I just wanted to give you that. Now, as we take a look today, temperatures upper 40s to near 50 for some inland spots. Up on the Eastern Shore, low 40s there. We'll see upper 40s to near 50 for the peninsula. The Middle Peninsula, pretty similar. And then down across interior North Carolina, upper 40s to near 50. We'll see mid-40s at the Outer Banks. Tonight's low down around 33, mainly clear. And tomorrow we're going to see temperatures back up around 54, mostly sunny. Really nice tomorrow. Enjoy it because we do have that chance for some unsettled weather on Thursday. Maybe rain mix with snow on Thursday. It's certainly a possibility. Friday, we're seeing temperatures back in the low 40s and then a little bit nicer, warming up as we get into Saturday. Right now, I will tell you guys, we do have a chance for maybe a little more precip on Sunday. If the Euro's right, maybe we see a few more light snow showers or mix on Sunday. GFS is saying dry. Some of the other models still pointing to dry weather on Sunday. So this is a wait and see kind of a thing late in the weekend. For now, we're going to see sunshine, but bundle up today.
You say bundle up, Craig, and I just want to be clear about something. You said that 4-letter word in there. You know how I feel about it. Not a fan.
You're revealing your Southern heritage here coming up.
I don't
from
care. There's
the
a little
deep
bit of
South,
Southern, little bit of Southern bias. That's
Some
for
of
sure.
us enjoy 4 seasons. So a little bit of snow's not a bad thing. It's winter, Eugene.
I know. I just feel as though we had enough winter last year, and I could go without a little bit of it this year. That's okay. But I'm asking you this question, not because of me, but I know there are going to be a lot of people, particularly from here, who are going to be traveling up to Richmond. Saturday is the inauguration for Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger. It's going to be historic in her becoming the first woman to become governor in Virginia. For those who are trying to get their luggage together to drive up there, maybe they're going up there days early or so, you're saying they could potentially experience some mix.
Yeah, if you're
I know it's a little bit north.
If you're going up on Thursday, stay alert to it. Certainly a possibility, but Friday should be good. Should be dry on Friday, and maybe it's going to be cold on Friday, low 40s. A little bit warmer on Saturday, so the inauguration itself should be in good shape.
Good. Okay.
Coming home on Sunday, if you're staying up maybe for an inauguration ceremony or celebration afterwards, some of the parties going on up around Richmond. Coming back Sunday may be a little touch and go. So just pay attention to the forecast updates, and we will work to keep you updated. I do want to mention one other thing, Eugene.
Okay,
we started talking NFL playoffs.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think the Rams are like 4-point favorites or 4.5-point favorites coming into Soldier. No doubt the Rams are excellent. But looking ahead to Sunday at Soldier in Chicago, the current forecast high is 19 degrees. And there is a chance that game plays in the evening. It's either going to be at 3 o'clock Central, I think, or 3 o'clock Eastern. Anyway, or it could be the evening game. Temperatures in the teens for the Bears-Rams. We'll see how the Rams like that cold weather. That's bear weather.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say they won't like it at all. Now Matthew Stafford, the quarterback for the Rams, did play in Detroit for a number of years.
That was in a dome.
As we know. It was in a dome. And where did Matthew Stafford play in college? Georgia. Even for that, I don't think this I don't think he's really going to be wanting to play in that.
The Bears have had Stafford's number over the years. He's one outstanding quarterback that they've been able to figure out. So that being said, the Rams are still favored, but I do think at least it's interesting that it's going to be cold in Chicago.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And not to go too much of a deep dive into it, but we're talking about the forecast and weather and how it has an impact on everything. We talk about this often. But when you're talking about sports, I even saw an interview recently with now newly crowned president of football for the Atlanta Falcons, Matt Ryan, or Matty Ice as we call him in Atlanta, and he was asked about maybe 2 or so weeks ago before he officially got the job, something that he would have done differently in the season, and it was when they played, I believe, Miami.
Okay.
Now, if you're familiar with the Mercedes-Benz Dome where the
Right.
Falcons play, it has the ability to open
Open it
and
up,
close. That particular day in Georgia, rare day, it was cold, wet.
Yeah.
And Miami does not play well in that.
Yeah.
Matt Ryan said what he would have
Open
done,
it up.
he would have opened it up. And I think the previous week they played the Jets terrible with terrible conditions. And he said, that's one of those moments where you use the forecast to your advantage. We ended up losing that game as an Atlanta Falcons fan. So
it's gonna
it
be
really does
interesting.
make a difference.
And you got to weigh that between fan comfort and, strategic advantage. I will say for all of the Bears fans, the Packers fans, the Buffalo Bills fans, those that are really cold weather, you could throw Eagles and Giants in there as well.
Yeah.
Those that are used to playing that cold weather, the fans, they just they certainly bear down in Chicago, but they just deal with it. And hey, it's all for the team. Let's go. So it's actually really fun and exciting, but it does make it a bit uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable to say the least. And it's one thing to be playing in it. As a fan, you get my utmost respect if you just go and sit in it. So for sure. Craig, man, and best of luck to you as a Bears fan. He's been trying to toe the line between excitement and not getting ahead of himself all season long. I think you can finally get excited no matter what happens.
It's been a great
in this
season.
Next game. You guys have had a great year, great future ahead. Ben Johnson's doing a great job in his first year.
Let's hope we're not done yet. Let's bear down.
Yes.
That's the bear claw right there.
Let's bear down and hope that some of that Chicago weather doesn't make its way down here either. That's really
We'll
what we need
certainly
to be.
keep you updated on that, guys. Stay
All
warm
right.
today.
All right, Craig. Appreciate you. And don't forget, you can always find more from Craig on the weather desk. It actually is right here on 13 News Now Plus. Right before, really, it ends at 9:30. It starts at 9 o'clock every single day on the 13 News Now Plus app. And there he hits on anything that has to deal with weather, not just within our region or even across the nation. Sometimes it takes him even further. And then other phenomenons that Craig will get into as well that touch on the forecast and on weather. It's a really cool show. You should check that out Monday through Friday, every day at 9 a.m. on 13 News Now Plus. Okay, let's switch gears here right now. I told you that we're monitoring a few different things, and court hearings really kind of the name of the game here today. We're right now monitoring the trial that has resumed in the former school police officer in Uvalde, Texas, Adrian Gonzalez, who faces 29 counts, including child endangerment for not allegedly doing enough in response on that deadly shooting, that tragedy that took place a few years ago at Robb Elementary School. As you recall, there were hundreds of officers who responded on that day, and it took them more than an hour, 77 minutes, for them to engage with the gunman inside of the school, which again claimed the lives of 19 children and 2 adults. Gonzalez has pleaded not guilty in this case. His defense and others say he is being scapegoated in this case. And earlier in this trial, there was an attempt for a mistrial that was denied. The question had to deal with the testimony of one of the witnesses. And we are still receiving testimony, as is right now. You can see there is someone on the stand here as we start this trial that just kicked back into session here within the last few minutes. Now, we're going to listen in for a little bit, but we'll probably go in and out, just monitoring what is being discussed. And we'll come back in just a few seconds here just to give you a hint of what's being discussed. We'll come on out. Okay, all right. We are going to continue to monitor that. It looks like we don't have the sound for that at the moment, and that is okay. Another trial that I'm kind of watching to get updates as we go through, a court hearing, I should say, is the court hearing also involving Luigi Mangione. Federal judge in that case, we have just learned today, has ordered a hearing over the search and seizure of the alleged gunman's backpack. Now, in this particular case, you probably are aware of the name. Mangione is accused of the shooting and killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a New York City sidewalk back in 2024. You recall that video that went viral, and people all across the country were watching this unfold as this massive manhunt then went underway, and it took a little bit for Mangione to be captured at a fast food restaurant all the way in Pennsylvania. Now, here's the deal when it comes to the latest developments here today with this judge ordering in a federal court a separate hearing over the search and seizure of his backpack. There's questions over whether or not the way in which police were able to obtain that materials that were found inside that backpack were legal. And so now there's going to be a hearing on that exact question. And in that backpack, police in Pennsylvania say that they found evidence, including an alleged murder weapon, a notebook, and writings. All right, things that they say are key to this case. Defense attorneys are trying to take those items out of the federal case, which, by the way, if Mangione is convicted in that federal trial, it could result in a possible death penalty. So there's a lot at stake here when it comes to that particular case in New York City. So just wanted to mention that. The new news there today is that a federal judge in that case against Mangione has ordered a hearing over the search and seizure of the alleged gunman's backpack. Okay, another case that we are following today is something that took place over the weekend. This is at the federal level. The continued drama involving the Trump administration and the Federal Reserve. We now know that the Department of Justice has opened an investigation into the renovation of the Federal Reserve's D.C. headquarters and its chairman, Jerome Powell. Prosecutors are now accusing Powell of lying to Congress, of testifying before the Senate about the cost of those renovations last June. All right. The price tag on the renovations, from what we know, is about $2.5 billion. Now, that has been a rising cost over the years and what was initially expected. And Powell is now pushing back, though, against the claims that the project has been mismanaged. He says this investigation is more about the Trump administration attempting to pressure the Fed into lowering the interest rates to the manner in which the administration would like, particularly when it comes to President Trump. This is something we have talked about here on the stream. We have aired live in the past when Fed Chair Jerome Powell and President Trump were together touring the facilities of where that new building is supposed to be. And we saw live the moment in which President Trump was challenging Powell and Powell back and forth when it came to the price of the particular renovations. We talked about how the president has sought to remove members of the Fed from their position and how that has been a back and forth, creating a legal battle in that effect. And he has been very outspoken about wanting the Fed to lower the interest rates even further than what they have here in recent months, because he says that it would create an economic boost and for the national economy. Jerome Powell has consistently said, hey, the Fed chair needs to be independent. Okay, so on the heels of this news coming out about the Trump administration investigating Powell, he did release a video sharing his thoughts and concerns on social media. And so we're going to listen to what he says here, again, as he says that the interest rate should be based on evidence and economic conditions. It should not have to answer to political pressure or intimidation. Listen to his words.
Good evening. On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned, in part, a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people. Thank you.
Okay, so already we've seen some responses from lawmakers about this particular situation. First, we have Virginia Senator Mark Warner. He had a lot to say about this. I'll read a portion of his statement. He said the Fed was designed to operate independently, insulated from political pressure so that it can make tough decisions based on data and the long-term health of the economy, not the whims of any one president. That independence provides the stability that markets, investors, and everyday Americans rely on. Using the threat of criminal prosecution to pressure the Fed over interest rates is a direct assault on that foundation and puts the economic security of millions of Americans at risk. Uncertainty and instability can ripple through the economy, affecting borrowing costs and making it harder for families to buy a home, run a small business, or afford everyday necessities like food, fuel, and diapers. He says, unfortunately, we have seen this pattern before. He says, over the past year, the Justice Department has repeatedly targeted the president's perceived political adversaries, only to have courts and grand juries reject these cases as baseless and politically motivated. He said, we have also seen the president attempt to remove a sitting Federal Reserve board member, underscoring his willingness to attack the Fed for refusing to fall in line. Warner says the administration's latest attacks on the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, are just the most recent example of Donald Trump's chaos-driven approach to the economy. And once again, it's working Americans who will pay the price, from impulsive trade wars and erratic tariffs to deficit-exploding tax cuts and attacks on the Fed independence. President Trump has shown time and again that he's more interested in political theater than helping the American people. The result is higher cost for families, uncertainty for businesses, and diminished confidence in our economic leadership around the world. That was from Democratic Senator Mark Warner here in Virginia. We also have a statement from Republican Senator Tillis, who is in North Carolina. Here's Tom Tillis, again, out of North Carolina, the Republican. He says, if there were any remaining doubt whether advisors within the Trump administration are actively pushing to end the independence of the Federal Reserve, there should now be none. It is now the independence and credibility of the Department of Justice that are in question. I will oppose the confirmation of any nominee for the Fed, including the upcoming Fed chair vacancy, until this legal matter is fully resolved. Okay, so you're getting the response here from the news that broke over the weekend, that Jerome Powell is being investigated by the DOJ, and the Federal Reserve is being investigated by the DOJ for what they say is his comments that he made to the Senate sometime in the past, last June, about the renovations and the cost of those renovations for the new buildings that they're looking into. Okay, but let's listen to the Director of National Economic Council about this ordeal. This is Kevin Hassett, who responded to the news and had an interesting perspective.
Oh, okay. Can I ask you, forgive me, sort of how to begin with this subpoena to the Fed? Are you able to say what the president signed off on this action?
No, I don't have any information. I've not seen any communication from the Justice Department. That I respect the independence of the Justice Department and the Fed, but I've not seen any materials that have been handed to the Fed by the Justice Department.
And you don't know what the president personally approved of?
I do not, yeah.
But can you say whether you have any thoughts about what impact this could have on the markets?
I would expect that the markets would be happy to see that there's more transparency with the Fed. It's something that people have been calling for quite a long time.
Are you worried that the probe undermines the independence of the central bank and could destabilize the markets?
I guess the question is, if you think the building costs $20 billion or $10 billion, do you think at some point that it's appropriate for the federal government to investigate? And it seems like the Justice Department has decided that they want to see what's going on over there with this building that's, massively more expensive than any building in the history of Washington. And if I were Fed chair, I would want them to do that. I think that it's really important to understand where the taxpayer money goes and to understand why it goes this way or that.
Do you think there's a chance Powell will stay on as a governor on the board even after his term as chair?
I'm not sure about that. I've not talked to Jay about that. He's a good person. If he wants to continue government service, then he'll make that call when the time comes.
You think that would be something that next Fed chair, whether it's yourself or someone else, would?
We'd have to see how it goes. But Jay's a good person.
And you're still interested in the job?
Yes.
Do you have any updated timeline on when the president will make an announcement? Before
no.
Davos, perhaps?
No, I don't.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Director.
So there you heard it from him. He said that he would want, if he were the Fed chair for the DOJ, to look into how the money is being spent, on behalf of taxpayers there. So it'll be interesting what happens here in this motion when it comes to the unprecedented nature of it. Obviously, you have the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, who is pushing back on it, and he has his stance that this is not about anything regarding a mismanagement or a court case or investigation that has any kind of real grounds. His argument is that this is all about pressure to do what the president wants. But that is obviously not the argument from the DOJ in this case. They believe they have something that they can look into. So interesting there. We will, of course, continue to monitor what happens in that case as it moves forward. But certainly it is an escalation of the tensions between the president and the Trump administration and the Federal Reserve. And so that should be really interesting. Okay, right now we are seeing something coming up. It's kind of a theme here right now, Sarah, when it comes to court cases. We went to, one to the other, and now how about Supreme Court? There is a Supreme Court case that is happening right now out of Louisiana. It's the first argument of 2026 as we are in the new year, and this is involving Chevron and a parish in Louisiana, okay? Within this particular case, they're confronting a conversation in which a federal contractor can transfer a case from state to federal court. All right, the question, according to the Supreme Court, comes to the justices in a high-profile case by Louisiana parishes. If you're unfamiliar with what a parish is, that's like counties. Louisiana, they don't call them counties per se, they call them parishes. The equivalent, again, of counties in that state, seeking to hold oil and gas companies liable for damages to the Louisiana coast. So we have an environmental impact that could come out of this, as well as probably a financial and economic one, too. A federal appeals court in New Orleans rejected the company's latest attempt to move the case to federal court, but now the Supreme Court is deciding that it will weigh in. So again, this is taking place right now. We'll go ahead and see if we can listen in for a little bit to the arguments made by both sides here to the Supreme Court out of Louisiana. Again, this case involving oil companies and local communities there, and whether or not these oil companies have any kind of responsibility to any damage that can happen to a coast. This in Louisiana, but obviously, as we know, for these Supreme Court cases, they can set a precedent for the rest of the country. Let's see where they are in this case.
That approach too, there's kind of an intermediate where you say like there's 3 or 4 factors that make this an easy case, and those are relevant, but we can wait for the next case when only 3 of the 4 factors are present.
Thank you.
Justice Barrett.
A couple of factual questions. And thinking about how settled the factual record is here for purposes of applying a test, it seemed like there was, I understand all the reasons why PAW is a federal agency from your point of view. I understand all of the evidence from that. But do you understand respondents to contest that point at all? Because it seems in some places like they cast doubt on it. Is that settled?
I mean, I think it's settled beyond any reasonable debate, but I suppose if there really were a debate on that, this is a context where if you think there's a factual dispute, you essentially defer to the plausible allegations in the removal petition. And I think based on that, we're more than plausible. I mean, we have the official history that supports, I think, really what we're saying. Now, like, they point out that, well, the state still had some residual role in regulating production. I don't think they're wrong about the fact that the state still had some residual role, but it's black and white in terms of the federal government's role in the war versus outside of the war. So.
Okay.
But in all events, if you thought there was a factual dispute, you still end up deferring to the plausible allegations in the removal petition, and any factual issues get sorted out in federal court, not in state court.
Okay, second question is, Louisiana says that you grossly mischaracterize whether the state is trying to hold you liable for the World War II activities. Mr. Aguinaldo says, no, this is just about the defense. The only thing that's relevant is they're showing that the activities were lawfully commenced before the Louisiana statute was enacted. I've read the expert report, and I can see why. Right. Is it the expert report that's leading you to say that, yes, we're actually being held, they're trying to hold us liable for that, as opposed to having it be relevant solely for the defense?
So, I think as a practical matter, it was the expert report that sort of started the whole re-removal effort. And I think even the Fifth Circuit, when it considered that, said, yeah, the World War II is directly at issue here. There were hints of that even in the original complaint, because if you look at the complaint, they're asking, one of the forms of relief is to restore this to its original condition. And of course, there's nothing more effective in a state court sort of jury presentation than a before and after presentation. And the before and after photos they want to show are the bayou before the war and now in sort of 2026, whatever it is. And so, that's a much less effective demonstrative if it's 1981 to now, and there's still even further problems. But if they would have strictly limited this to 1980 forward, we wouldn't have this argument based on World War II. But again, the Rozelle expert report, I think, speaks for itself.
Thanks.
Justice Jackson?
So assuming that I think that or relating to was just a mere conforming amendment, and therefore we're still in the land of causal nexus, but for nexus, I thought your client had a pretty good argument that you satisfied that, but it seemed like you were giving it up in your conversation with Justice Thomas. So can you help me to understand, maybe I'm misunderstanding what is necessary for causation, but I thought that the argument was that there was a connection, a sufficient nexus between the gas contracts and the production of crude oil, which is what is being alleged here.
So I didn't mean to give that up, and I thought I specifically said I'd give it a try. So let me give it a try.
Please.
Yes, you could say that this is the unusual case where even if you have a causal nexus test of some sort, we would still satisfy it. In fact, I had a colloquy with the Fifth Circuit judge in this case and who proposed but for as the test. And I thought we could satisfy but for if it's the test. I don't think it is the test, but I think we could satisfy it here because it is, it is both the reality that we did refine a substantial amount of crude from our own fields in these cases. And it is also an undeniable reality that the crude here is the absolute indispensable component. I mean, there's this great line.
I thought all the arguments and the things that you were saying, for example, to Justice Kagan, the stuff about the wartime context and the actual product here was your answer to why this would satisfy but for contact.
I mean, I agree. There's a great line in the PAW history that's reproduced at Joint Appendix page 5 that basically says, look, oil starts in the earth, and without crude, all of those towering wartime refineries would lay idle. So, there's no question that the crude in general is the but-for cause. Now, I think my friends are going to get up here and say, well, but the contracts would have allowed you to use different crude that you purchased on the open market as opposed to the crude that you produced. And that's the argument that tripped up the Fifth Circuit. But just to be as clear as I can, one way for us to win is the way that you're talking about, that it's just but-for. The other way for us to win is, and that was what I was trying to say to Justice Thomas, is even apart from the 2011 amendments, if you think the production activities are under federal authority because of the pervasive wartime regulation, then it's not, I don't need related to at all. Then it's for the activity.
Let me just ask you really quickly about the Fifth Circuit's opinion, because I understood them to be requiring a contractual directive with respect to crude oil production. And it seems to me that that test is even more stringent than a but-for. Am I right about that? I mean, that's what seems wrong about the Fifth Circuit's test.
You are absolutely right about that, and that's why I thought I could tell the Fifth Circuit that we could live with but-for, but we can't live with contractual direction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Roper?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. By assisting the federal government in obtaining a critical wartime product under federal supervision, petitioners acted under a federal officer in refining avgas. That refining is an act under color of federal office that can support removal, and these suits relate to that act because they target the production of the crude oil that was the key ingredient in avgas and that the federal government linked to that refining by both contract and regulation. Respondents go all in on their alternative argument that petitioners must have been acting under a federal officer in the crude production that these suits are for. But the statute contains no such requirement, which would nullify Congress's addition of relating to. Regardless, petitioners were acting under a federal officer in producing crude, given the Petroleum Administration for War's unique role supervising production to further the war effort. I welcome questions.
Would your approach apply to contract disputes with employees also?
Yes, in our view, if we're talking about the sort of direct thing that is going into the product, and of course labor is a critical component of creating a federally contracted product, that is a sufficient connection. You of course don't need to even go that far for petitioners to win this case. But we have readily acknowledged that there are going to be hard line drawing problems here, although I agree with Mr. Clement that the federal defense requirement is going to take care of many of them. And we ultimately see that line drawing problem as inherent in Congress's choice to use this broad, capacious term relating to. And the way you have dealt with
Don't you think it's odd, though, that, as I think Justice Jackson alluded to, that this is simply a conforming amendment and it's doing so much substantive work?
No, not at all. I fully agree with Mr. Clement's answer there. I think the reason you only see this argument in an amicus brief and not in either of the red briefs is that there is just no way to get there textually. When Congress enacted the statute in 2011, this court had in over a dozen cases said that relating to is a broad, capacious term, and then Congress puts that language in a statute that this court, in 5 opinions, had said was a broad statute that was to be liberally construed. And so I just don't see how you can limit relating to just this sort of narrow pre-suit discovery issue. And we also know that Congress wasn't focused on just that problem, because if you look at the very next page of the Act, Congress amends Section 1447D, which creates a right to appeal in every federal officer removal case. And everyone agrees that that provision is not limited to pre-suit discovery actions. That was the basis for this court's BP decision a few years ago. And so I think it's clear from the text and context that Congress was addressing a broader issue here.
Well, you're right, obviously, that relating to is very broad, but it's hard to see where you stop. I mean, is it a butterfly effect? You know, the butterfly flaps its wings and it has the end result halfway around the world?
So the way this court has dealt with this problem in the preemption context, which we think is instructive here, is in one of two ways. So first, in one set of cases like Morales, what you've said is that this is an easy case, there are going to be hard ones, and we leave those line drawing problems for another day. But of course, in the course of such an opinion, you would presumably explain why this is an easy case, namely that avgas, or that crude oil is the indispensable ingredient in avgas, and that the federal government itself recognized this link contemporaneously. And while I wouldn't want to suggest that those facts are somehow talismanic, in the ordinary course of common law adjudication, that is going to provide guidance to the lower courts in how to deal with it.
So you want us to do the same thing we did in the prior case and just say, well, there might be hard cases down the line, but we're not, I mean, how many times are we supposed to say that?
Sure, so that's option one of how to write the opinion. Option two is, I agree with what Mr. Clement said, which is you say what you said in Watson and what you've done in the ERISA context, which is if you want to try to put more meat on the bones, you look to the statutory history, the context, the objectives, and here this court has a deep body of precedent going back to 1880 that is explaining the objectives of federal officer removal. Most importantly, protecting the federal government from interference with its operations. And to operationalize that, I agree with Mr. Clement, what we would want to do is just ask, if the defendant had been enjoined at the time, would that have impaired his ability, interfered with his ability to assist the federal government? And here the answer to that question is obviously yes, when we are talking about the production of the indispensable ingredient in a critical military product, and when the federal government banned many of the specific practices respondents favor.
So could you summarize that into a test of some sort? It seems to be part of your argument in your brief that the goals of the federal officer removal statute can provide a useful limit on the seemingly expansive reach of the relating to phrase, but how do you articulate that?
Yeah, so the question we would ask is, would enjoining the charged conduct at the time have impaired the defendant's ability to assist the federal government? So suppose, for example—
I mean, isn't that going to be true of any federal contractor? Presumably, a federal contractor is doing something that the federal government needs. So if you enjoin the federal contractor, you're going to be impairing the operations of the federal government. That seems as though you have a federal contractor, you meet your test.
No, I think that's going to fail in two respects. So one, you're going to have this sort of category of cases that are collateral to the contract. I mean, the oil companies here are doing all sorts of stuff besides refining avgas. And if we're talking about a lawsuit against their petroleum jelly factory or their plastics factory, that seems less likely to directly impede the avgas refining. And you're also going to have stuff that is just too far up the supply chain where you're getting so attenuated that this is the one product, the one ingredient that maybe they were using but everyone else wasn't using it.
You just said directly impede, and Mr. Clement took that word out of Justice Kavanaugh's formulation.
Yes.
Notably.
I would not
I
put
can
that
easily see that in different product lines, one might say, I have a contract in one product line, but over here, interference over here in another product line will impair my ability to meet my government contract in the first. Thoughts?
I think courts can exercise a degree of common sense and say, that is not plausible, it is too attenuated. Because remember here, this is the usual—
So you'd have us put direct into Mr. Clement's
I would not
test.
Put direct in the test. I think
you
if it is direct—
I think you said direct in response to Justice Kagan, so I'm just trying to get—
Sure. If it's direct, I think it's obvious. But I think we know that it can't be direct because that's the sort of language of proximate causation, and everyone agrees this is
Chief's butterfly effect problem, then.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the butterfly—
Big Bang is related to you being here today, counsel, right?
Of course. I think what you say in that context is I think courts are going to take these cases as they have in the ERISA context and the preemption context, and I don't think we have seen that flood of cases in the airline deregulation context. For example, I think courts have applied sense and said airline advertising is related to airline rates, but maybe if we're talking about a strike at the mechanics plant, wherever, that is going to be too attenuated. And maybe Mr. Clement can come up with some theory of why that is related, but I think courts have...
Oh, I guarantee you he would.
Yes, and I think courts have not struggled with that. At the end of the day, this court has offered these guideposts, and of course there are going to be hard cases, and I don't want to run away from that. I think that, though, that is inherent in Congress's choice in picking this language. Because remember, Congress is enacting the statute in 2011 after Justice Scalia's concurrence in Dillingham saying our ERISA preemption test is too hard to apply, after his concurrence in Egelhoff. And so Congress came in here eyes wide open, knowing that relating to is a broad term.
But Congress also said what it was doing in the report. This is the thing that is a little troublesome for me, that to the extent that you are relying on arguments about what Congress actually intended, as opposed to just looking at the words of the statute, it seems to me we're in the territory where we look at the House report and see what Congress said about what it was doing. And in the House report, Congress described the existing causal nexus requirement, saying that federal officers, quote, must demonstrate a causal connection between the charged conduct and the asserted official authority. And in the testimony Congress looked at during that time, consistently people said we're not trying to change that standard. So if we are interested in being consistent with what Congress intended, I don't understand why the evidence doesn't show that Congress was not trying to change this standard.
So we see a difference between identifying statutory objectives by looking to this court's 150 years of case law, applying the statute, and looking in the specific House report.
No, but you said Congress is coming in eyes wide open relative to our case law. And what I'm saying is yes, and then they wrote what it is that they were trying to do in the report.
And to be clear, we absolutely agree that the motivating event for this act was that a congresswoman found herself stuck in state court in a subpoena case, and Congress didn't like that result and wanted to make sure that the congresswoman could have her case in federal court. But I don't think it follows that that specific problem that motivated the act is the sum total of what Congress did. And I'll, I think, offer the same answer as Mr. Clement, which is we know that from the text. And of course, we also know that page 6 of the House report, the section by section analysis.
Do you think they lose if I disagree with you?
So
do they not meet the causal nexus test here?
We would say that the relating to theory does not meet the pre-2011 test, but it does meet causation in a sort of broader sense.
No, I mean on these facts. Does Chevron lose if we disagree with you about the causal nexus requirement?
No, for two reasons. First, we, of course, have our alternative argument that the Petroleum Administration for War was supervising all of this directly, causally, et cetera. We also think that there is causation here, if you want to call it that, in a sort of looser, broader sense of the word, that relating to would clearly encompass along the lines of Justice Alito's concurrence in Ford Motor Company exploring this question in the personal jurisdiction context. Because we know that the reason that these companies were refining their own crude oil was not a matter of happenstance. It was because the federal government specifically told them to do that because, in part, this crude was uniquely suited for making avgas. And we also have causation here at a broader scale in that there's no question that these oil companies generally increase production to meet their needs, and so the only difference here comes from the happenstance of respondents having tried to slice this case up.
Thank you, counsel. Justice Thomas, Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan.
I'll give you a hypo, Mr. Roper. Suppose there's an airline crash of some kind, and somebody brings a lawsuit. It's a private airline, and somebody brings a lawsuit and says there's a defective part. And the airplane manufacturing company says, this part that you're talking about, it also goes into all the airplanes that we make for the federal government, which is a very substantial part of our business. So if you enjoin us from using this part, it's really going to affect the federal government. Does that mean that that suit, which is a standard state tort suit, should be removed?
And I assume there that the remedy is just for damages and not actually for an injunction against production of the part. In that case, I would say no, that is not removable because, effectively what that remedy is asking for is the equivalent of an injunction against the use of the part in civilian planes. Of course, if they came in and said...
But if they're just asking for damages, which would effectively prevent, it's like, oh my gosh, if we're going to be subject to damages here, we've better find another part. So that would affect the way that the federal government is going to, maybe the federal government even asked for this part.
I don't think that
what happens
affects it in
then?
the relevant sense because the measure of damages in that case is presumably pegged to the use of the part in the civilian plane. Of course, if they came in and said state law permits us to get a universal injunction against the production of this part for anyone ever, that we would have much greater concerns about because that would actually be impeding the federal government's contact. But just a normal state law damages action for purely civilian conduct, no.
What does it mean to have a colorable federal defense?
So this court's cases haven't fully explored that question. It's definitely something above frivolous. It seems to be, as we read the cases, a little bit more than that. But the basic gist of the cases as we take it is that when the defendant's story is that they were doing this because the federal government told them to do so, that should be a question that should ultimately be resolved in federal court.
I mean, one of the issues here, right, is that each of the three parts of this, you can always say, oh, well, that it'll be taken care of by the other prong of the test, but each of the three prongs is setting a really low bar, including the federal defense prong. It's not like you have to have a federal defense. It's you have to have a colorable federal defense, which is just barely above frivolous.
Yes, and I think that that is intentional. When you think about this statute against the backdrop of Congress's authority under Article 3 to put every federal defense in federal court, and so Congress has created this exception to the well-pleaded complaint rule, and it has identified this subset of cases that most directly implicate the federal government. And we don't want that to be an extraordinarily high bar because, again, as Mr. Clement said, all we are talking about here is a forum, and when the defendant has a plausible story that the federal government told them to do this, that is a story we ultimately want to be resolved by a federal judge in federal court. I mean, in the context of this case, I don't think it casts any aspersions on the good people of Plaquemines Parish to say that when we're talking about liability for conduct the federal government directed during World War II, that is a question that should be resolved in federal court.
Justice Gorsuch?
Your argument in your brief had a lot to do with the production of crude as opposed to the refining activity. That wasn't a central feature of the petitioner's argument, and respondents contend that it was way below. Thoughts?
We definitely disagree that it's waived. If you look at page 6 of the amended removal petition, it is preserved, at least at that stage. I agree they did not continue to press it, but the reason that argument is in our brief.
You're saying it was presented to the district court, but not to the Court of Appeals.
Correct. I would say it's forfeited but not waived, and we, of course, are happy to win on relating to. That's the part of the statute that applies directly to our officers. So we are, if anything, prefer the refinery theory. But the reason that that argument is in our brief is twofold. First,
that's enough for me.
Okay,
thank you. Appreciate it.
Justice Kavanaugh?
If we define relating to too narrowly, from your perspective, what are the effects on the federal government going forward?
So, Justice Kavanaugh, we think it's important to remember that this statute comes out of some of the most intense moments of state and federal conflict in our nation's history, like Reconstruction, Prohibition, and the South Carolina nullification crisis. So we have deep concerns about cases that do have that risk of interfering with the federal government's operations proceeding in state court. This case is, of course, a poster child for that. A couple other buckets of cases that are of concern to us are, first, the sort of retaliation scenario that is laid out in Senator Lee's brief, where you have those assisting the federal government as contractors or in other ways with whatever is the controversial policy of the day being targeted by hostile states or localities who know not to go after the federal conduct itself, but sort of work around the margins to go after the federal contractor. And in that scenario, if you have a federal colorable defense and plausible allegations that the suit is relating to the federal conduct, we absolutely want that case in federal court. The other bucket that concerns us is the military contractor scenario. There's all of these failure to warn asbestos cases that are cited at page 28 of Mr. Clement's brief. I think the logic of Louisiana's argument here is that all of those cases go to state court because the contractors were not acting under a federal officer in giving warnings. The government only said use asbestos, and it didn't say anything about the warnings. And when we're talking about how federal contractors are implementing their federal contracts, especially in the military context, we definitely want a federal forum there as well.
And does that worry extend to incentives for military contractors going forward then?
Yes, that is also a concern as well. I mean, we think the Fifth Circuit's ruling here is really novel. This contractual directive test we don't see anywhere in the statute or this court's prior cases. And the idea that you would need a specific term in the contract addressing everything that you might be sued over, we see as deeply unworkable and also problematic.
Thank you.
Justice Barrett. Justice Jackson.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Aguinaga.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. The federal officer removal statute authorizes the removal of a civil action commenced against a person acting under a federal officer. As that statutory text suggests, you have to look at the complaint that actually commenced the civil action. That complaint tells you the acts by the defendant that are charged, and then you ask, did the defendant commit those charged acts under a federal officer? That is the straightforward reading of the statute that is reflected in the Watson Court's statement that a defendant may remove to federal court only if, in committing the charged acts, he was acting under a federal officer. And that's what we think makes this an easy case. Petitioners not only abandoned below any argument that they were acting under a federal officer in committing the acts charged in our complaints, but they also told the district courts in italics that they did not need to be acting under a federal officer in committing those acts. And let me be specific about those acts that are actually charged, because we now know, having gone to trial with Chevron down in Point Lahash, that they do not dispute that they dumped billions of gallons of produced water from oil wells directly into our marsh, both before and after 1980. That's why this is such a massive deal for the state of Louisiana. And that's why I think they abandoned any theory that they acted in that misconduct way under a federal officer. All that is why I say we think this is an easy case and the court should affirm. I welcome the court's questions.
How much can you rely on Watson, which is quite different factually? It's a heavily regulated company, versus, and it was pre-2011. So how much work does Watson actually do for you?
Well, Your Honor, I think Watson's extremely important for us because one thing it does is it catalogs this court's cases going all the way back to Tennessee versus Davis, where the court has said, and this culminated in Watson, the court said all of those precedents, when they're talking about acting under federal authority, they're talking about an agent of the federal government that is acting within the scope of his authority. That's the backdrop against which this court decided Watson. And so I think when you open your analysis section in Watson and you say that a defendant can only remove only if he engages in those charged acts while under a federal officer, I think that's what this court was summarizing, was that entire backdrop of precedents that led up to Watson. Now, I will say, Your Honor, I think the court's decision in Tennessee versus Davis, you look at the Willingham case, what Watson says and reflecting on all those precedents is that when we talk about an agent of the federal government acting within the scope of authority, we're asking about somebody which is basically executing federal duties, except they're doing that on behalf of a federal officer. And that's why we've pointed out in the red brief this fundamental disconnect between this refinery theory, which we could not sue. We could not sue petitioners under our law on this refinery theory because we literally can't grab conduct that is 300 miles away in Port Arthur, Texas at a refinery and say that violates our coastal law. That disconnect on the one hand, whereas the charged conduct that we've outlined in the complaint is literally in the marsh in Plaquemines Parish. This court has never seen, and petitioners have not identified for you, any case where this court has basically mixed and matched the acting under conduct that satisfies prong 1 with whatever the conduct is that satisfies prong 2. Now, my friends on the other side talked a lot about preemption, federal colorable defenses. If I could hit one thing strong this morning, it's this idea that they have a federal colorable defense. Justice Barrett, you asked about whether that's a live issue. I thought to myself, we don't actually have to speculate about whether, how these defenses shake out because we've gone to trial. So if you go down to the public records there at Point Lahash in Plaquemines Parish and you look at the 18-day trial that we had with Chevron, I said, my gosh, I'm going to read that transcript back, front to back and see how did this narrative of the federal government's bidding in World War II play out and how did the preemption defense play out? And you know what? The jury heard crickets on that because none of that was raised in the Roselle trial. I think that's as dead a giveaway as any, that for all the narrative you see in your briefs in the federal courts about how this is us targeting World War II conduct and everything they did was directed by federal officers, nothing like that in the actual state court proceedings. I think that's the exact same story that would play out in federal court. And that's just the fundamental mismatch in practice. That's the reality, Justice Barrett.
Mr. Aguinaga, I have a question about whether you designated the parish's counsel to represent you in the Fifth Circuit. On pages 34 and 35 of your brief, you try to run away from that concession that counsel made before the Fifth Circuit on the acting under prong, and you say, well, Louisiana didn't appear, but didn't the counsel for the parishes represent you and appear on your behalf and concede that point?
So a couple of things there, Justice Barrett. We were out counsel table for sure with the parishes. We've been in lockstep with the parishes the whole time. And so we ceded our argument time to the parishes to represent all of respondents here in the Fifth Circuit. No doubt about that. I do have to push back on the idea that we're running away from a concession because, as you know, from that part of our brief, we vehemently disagree that there was any concession. I mean, I think the whole point, if you look at our Fifth Circuit briefs in both Cameron and Plaquemines Parish, the whole point of those briefs was Watson. It's this mismatch. It's like we told the Fifth Circuit, look, they're coming to you with this idea that under the refining contracts, they were acting under a federal officer, but we haven't sued. That was the whole point, and I think that's why you saw the Fifth Circuit take that on directly, and they rejected our argument, no doubt, unanimously. But that's the basis on which we won in the district courts. That was the whole arguments that we pressed in our Fifth Circuit briefs. And if you listen to that argument audio, I mean, with all respect to my friends on the other side, I don't think that's a fair characterization of what we argued at oral argument in the Fifth Circuit.
But you did, I mean, the parish's counsel did speak on your behalf. So if I read that transcript differently, then it does bind you too.
So, Your Honor, I'm happy to take, yes. I think, that, as I say, we've been, we have a joint defense agreement. We've been consistent with my friends from the parishes the whole time. And all I'm saying is that if you listen to that audio and then you look at our briefs and you look at the arguments we made in our bios here, we have been making the exact same argument the whole time, which is you could conceive of the federal, the federal refining contracts and the conduct under those contracts as acting under conduct if you had a suit that actually targeted refining activities.
Mr. Argan, I have another question. Do you understand there to be a factual dispute about whether PAW is a federal agency?
So, Your Honor, we have pressed in our briefs below, and I think my friends from the parish has pressed in their red brief here, the fact that the very textual point that if you look at the statute, it requires acting under a federal officer. And I think, there's some dicta in the court's decision in Watson that, and I'm actually quoting that first sentence in the analysis section where the court refers to acting under an agency or officer. The statute itself requires acting under an officer. They've never identified a particular officer that they were purportedly acting under instructions, from. I think a fortiori, if you were to look at the agency question, I don't think the statute actually allows them to come into federal court on the theory that they acted under a federal agency. But we have preserved that sort of threshold argument that, like, if you look at the right federal actor, there is no particular federal officer that they've identified. And then if you think of PAW is an agency, and we've not spelled that latter argument out, Justice Barrett. I mean, I think that's one thing that is interesting, but in all candor, we haven't spelled out.
Counsel, I'm a little concerned about what I see as a conflation of the different prongs in your argument. And you've said a couple times that what we should be looking for is acting under conduct, or did the defendant commit those acts while acting under a federal officer? And that's not the way I understood the statute to be read. I thought acting under was one prong, and it was related to the authority that you have as this defendant, whether you're a federal officer yourself or you're not, but you are acting under the authority of the federal government. And then we have the for or relating to any act. Mr. Clement says the who, the what. I see that, and you, I think, are collapsing them. So can you help me to understand why you're not?
Sure. So if I could give you a textual response based on the statute, and then just a response based on practice from the asbestos cases. So just as a textual matter, Your Honor, I think paragraph 1 in our red brief was very delicately crafted because I think the right way to interpret the statute is to say, it's a focus on the subject in the prefatory language in 1442A1. If you look at Pet App 182, the very first sentence, right, the subject there is a civil action. And then the rest of A1, what it's doing is telling you which civil actions may be removed. Now, my friends on the other side want to make prong 1 about who can remove and prong 2 about what suits can be removed.
But doesn't that follow from our case law? I guess I can't figure out how Willingham comes out the same way if you're right.
Right, Your Honor. So what I'm saying is that on our view, if you ask if you say that the rest of A1 basically asks which actions can be removed, prong 1 is which action, the action must be against a specific defendant. And the textual point I made in my opening is that if you take that phrase, a civil action commenced against a person acting under a federal officer, implicit in that language is a presupposition that that defendant has acted under a federal officer. Where do you go to find whether that defendant actually acted under a federal officer? The complaint is the one that actually commenced.
Are you saying that the act must be directed by the federal, the act in question has to be directed by the federal officer in order to give grounds for removal?
No, Your Honor.
What you're saying?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
And that's why I think that, this attack from the other side on that point is a bit misleading. So let me go to the asbestos cases, because we actually agree with pages 31 and 32 of Mr. Clement's.
But I mean, that is what the Fifth Circuit said here, didn't it? I mean, that was the basis for the Fifth Circuit's ruling, was that the production of the crude was not directed by the contracts. And so that's why, right? I mean, am I wrong about that?
So I think you're right, Your Honor, but I think what the Fifth Circuit was recognizing is the mismatch problem that we outlined in our red brief. They tried to solve that problem at prong 2, and our humble submission was that you should just solve that problem at prong 1. Now, if I could tell you why I agree with Mr. Clement's description of the asbestos cases and how they shake out pre and post 2011, remember the basic fact pattern in those cases is you've got a federal contract that says, contractor, you go refurbish a Navy ship and you install asbestos. So pre-2011, if there's a failure to warn claim about the asbestos being installed, the courts say, and the Lachiole panel in the Fifth Circuit, which had that same fact pattern, said, this doesn't suffice for federal officer removal because the claim is not for an act that was directed by the federal government. Now, post-2011, you've got related to, and as Mr. Clement says, once there's a failure to warn claim, it may not be that the federal government said specify these warnings or don't include warnings, but that doesn't matter. And that's why you have the outcome in Lachiole 2, the en banc decision from the Fifth Circuit that says, look, when you engaged in the act of installing asbestos, unquestionably, that is an act under a federal officer. That's prong 1. And so the only question remaining is prong 2. Is your failure to submit safety warnings or submit safety gear to your employees related to that act under a federal officer? That's why I think, the idea that our theory somehow dooms.
Okay, we're going to switch gears here. We were telling you that today there is the hearing that is taking place in Texas on that former Uvalde school police officer, Adrian Gonzalez, and we have someone who is taking the witness stand right now and has been there for a little bit of time. We do finally have audio in this case. Now, here's what we will tell you. Okay, we're going to be monitoring and listening very closely to what is going on today in this trial. This is a live stream that is being provided for us by CNN at the moment. So what we just want to let you know is we're going to listen closely, but if there's any moment where we feel like they're going to get into something that just might be too difficult for, you to hear, but for us to hear as well, we're going to come out of it at that time and continue to monitor. Maybe we can come back into it. I just want to go ahead and give that warning ahead of time that we are watching this live unfold, but we're going to be watching it very closely to make sure that the conversation or the images or anything of that nature is not too upsetting. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and listen in to the witness currently on the stand and the questioning that is happening right now in that case against that former Uvalde school police officer, Adrian Gonzalez.
Yeah, and that's, I'm not asking you to say anything else, but you were at this scene a long time, right? And right?
Correct.
And while you were there, you were never investigating Adrian Gonzalez, were you?
Never saw him.
Never saw him, but he was never a focus of your investigation at the time?
Our focus was just the mass shooting, the officer-involved shooting, collecting the appropriate the evidence located. Yes, sir.
All right. And so the prosecutor asked you a question that if you, because obviously you can't, it goes without saying that the police officer has to be able to see the target that they're going to shoot at if they are going to shoot, right?
Yes, we were responsible for that bullet to engage our target. Yes.
Of course you are, because otherwise you end up possibly as a defendant for shooting someone unlawfully, right?
Correct.
Because you can't return fire to the sound of gunshots.
Correct.
Presuming you know where the gunshots are coming from.
Correct.
Right, because you you've trained with a long weapon, I'm sure, like a rifle style weapon, I think you pointed the base, right?
Correct.
And you know through your training experience that if you fire that inside in a range, it will sound different than if you're firing it outside.
Of course, yes, sir.
Because the speed of the bullet coming out of the barrel, the muzzle velocity of that weapon is so fast, like it's so fast, especially the weapon in this case, it's faster than the speed of sound, right?
Correct.
You don't need to be an expert to testify that it is. So it's loud and it echoes.
Yes, sir.
And if that sound will bounce off of buildings.
Yes. I mean, it travels, yes.
It will travel and it will bounce. So you don't know where it's. Sometimes you fire a weapon outside, it can be difficult to identify where that's coming from.
But in this situation, not only we're identifying the sound, we're also gathering the information of our complainant, our victims, or our reporting parties as to where that sound's coming from as well.
Exactly, and if those two are not consistent, you hear and what someone is telling you doesn't match with what you're hearing. That creates even further problems for an officer to identify where this sound might be coming from, right?
It could, but I also want to listen to the information provided to me to follow that information and where it's coming from or where that person's hearing it from or seeing it from.
And let's talk about that. So hypothetically, and this is not it's not a trick, right? Let's talk about that scenario. So, for example, hypothetically, if I were saying to you, Ranger, I've seen someone shooting over here, right? And at the same time, you're hearing something like the report of a long-barreled weapon. The report of a long-barreled weapon or a rifle is the sound of it going bang, basically, right?
Sure.
And you are hearing something that is not consistent with what I'm saying. That could cause some confusion in you to know where those shots are being fired from, right?
Possibly.
Possibly. So you're not just going to fire blindly to your weapon to the sound of gunshots.
No, I'm going to take the information given to me, analyze it, look, process it, and if I identify the target, then engage.
But if you can't identify, if all you've got to identify the target, if there is a target, is a sound, you can't just fire towards the sound, right?
Correct.
No, you can't. And so, I'm talking about the prosecutor's first things and describe it. So you can't just do that. So, and obviously, and you said that the prosecutor asked you if you're dealing with an incident like this, do you take your time or you immediately react? Remember that?
I'm sorry?
In an incident like this, because we know this was an active shooter, right?
Correct.
Mr. Turner asked you if an officer should just take their time leisurely or should they immediately react, right? Remember that?
Yes, sir.
And of course you said time is of the essence. You must immediately react, right?
Correct.
But you'd agree with me that if hypothetically I were to say to you, because we're outside of here and you're not a police officer, right? And I'd say, I've just seen a man shooting his weapon running at that school, right? And you saw someone running at that school and you chased them down, that would be taking immediate action, right?
Correct.
So if someone did that, they would be taking immediate action.
Correct.
Right, okay. And then we spoke about some tactical movement, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, the prosecutor spoke about tactical movement. Judge, may I approach you?
Yes, sir.
Because you went to the scene, well, you spent 3 days there, right?
Yes, sir.
Rob Elementary. And what exhibits do we have?
3.
So this first one's number 3?
Yes.
Yes, please. I'm going to show you, Ranger, what's been marked. So just marked as defence 3, 4, and 5. You recognise this, right?
they're all outside photographs of evidentiary items.
Yeah, they're a fair and accurate depiction of the scene as you saw it on those days.
Correct.
Judge, defence offers, and we'll show it to opposing counsel first, what's been marked as defence 3, 4, and 5 into evidence. No objection, Your Honour.
They're admitted.
Judge, give 1 second so we can display them on the screen. May we publish, Ron?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll just try and sort out something about that.
Okay, we're not quite sure exactly what they're going to show here as a part of this evidence being brought into the trial right now for Adrian Gonzalez, but you are looking at an individual who was on the witness stand. As soon as I can clarify who this person is, of course, I will mention it. He's been here for a little bit of time, but remember, we did not and weren't able to get the live feed up right off the top here of our stream with the audio being cut off at the moment. But you're watching, or at least now you're seeing me, you just were watching the live stream there from inside of court in that trial of former Uvalde school police officer Adrian Gonzalez, who has been charged with 29 counts for his involvement and response to the mass shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, just a few years ago. A lot of the questions that we're been listening to here of late, which leads me to believe this person has some type of connection to law enforcement, etc., looked as though it was involving what are some of the steps that they would potentially take in a response of this magnitude. We saw some images that were being shown of the map outside of Robb Elementary School, and we heard at the moment conversation about perimeters and where they could potentially be. And so not quite sure if this individual is law enforcement. Again, we'll clarify that as soon as I'm able to have some time to do so, as we're looking at images of evidence markers from outside of what I would imagine there is Robb Elementary after that shooting just years ago there. Again, claiming the lives of 19 students and 2 teachers in that. And the big sticking point and concern for a lot of people in that community and across the country, a lot of questions regarding the response that day. When you look at the amount of time that passed between that shooting starting and that call taking place and officers arriving to the scene and then going in and confronting the gunman, in all, it was 77 minutes. 77 minutes before that took place. And there you were looking at Adrian Gonzalez, the former police officer who is on trial right now. And if convicted in this, it would be history in the making. This is a very rare case in which a police officer in this is being, charged and essentially held on trial for essentially not doing enough, right? And that's what we're looking at here. It would certainly be a historic moment in our cultural and our country when it comes to responsibility in a mass shooting, particularly a school shooting. So, this is why this is such a pivotal case. And then it leans to think what happens for other officers, et cetera, as we see some of the moments when they finally were able to go inside to Robb Elementary School on that fateful day. So I think, Sarah, with that, we're good. We can take it back now live and listen in again to the conversation that's taking place there at the trial.
Blindly towards it, right?
No, sir.
Because that would cause more problems than solutions it would solve, right?
Correct.
Because a dead cop can't help anyone, right?
Correct.
Right. But so we're talking about moving tactically. So the prosecutor's I think the prosecutor's suggestion is, so someone who's over here, let's say a police officer who got out of this vehicle here, who's on the south side of the building.
Yes, sir.
Right, so what we spoke about is, you're familiar with slicing the pie?
Yes, sir.
Or quartering a corner.
Yes, sir.
Like quartering would be more of a military phrase, right?
Yes, sir.
Slicing the pie or cutting the pie would be a civilian law enforcement term.
Correct.
Right, and then also the correct way, let's pretend someone was over here where I am. Right, somewhere in this west parking lot. Over here is the west parking lot, right?
Correct.
So if someone were to hear the report of gunfire over here, the correct way to approach it would be to take cover along this wall here, right?
Potentially one way.
One way.
You just can't see what else is out here in this vacant lot as far as any other potential concealment or cover to make a wider approach.
And that's a good point. We're talking about a wider approach. For argument's sake, because you were there, right? At this scene?
I was at the scene, but I didn't have much part in this. Yes, sir. But I was there, yes, sir.
I'm not trying to get
No, I understand.
You remember this is mostly an open field, right?
Okay, yes, sir.
And we see a little thin tree there.
Okay, yes, sir.
That is a tree.
Yes, sir.
Right, but it's not a substantial tree.
Correct.
That would be
But
possibly concealment.
potentially, yes, sir.
Potentially concealment, right, against a long barrel weapon, because we know what weapon we're talking about now.
Yes, sir.
High velocity.
Correct.
High power.
Correct.
Could penetrate that tree easily, right?
Correct.
So that tree is not cover.
Correct.
For a human body hiding behind it.
Correct.
From fire from the weapon we're going to see in this trial.
Correct.
Right. So there's no cover out here. Go with me on that. There's not.
Okay.
I represent to you. There's not. You were there. You tell me, Gary, there wasn't any. There was cover there if there was, right? There's
Correct.
not. Right. So the only cover you got is this building.
Okay.
Right. So can you see? And can you see what I'm indicating on the screen here?
It's a fenced-in area or protected area with their air conditioners.
So that's right. It's again, just guesstimate for me. How high do you think that fence is? Because you were there. Do you remember?
5 foot, 6 foot.
About that, right? And again,
4 foot.
From 4
4
to
to
6
6.
feet. 4 to 6 feet chain link fence.
Correct.
So in order to get to the corner of this building, so if someone were to, let's pretend for a second that this is the corner of the building, if I may move around the world, Judge. So let's pretend for a second this is the corner of the building, right, of that building there. Right, and I want to go to the corner of this building to take cover so that I can have a look round the other side into the west parking lot or slice the pie, right? Slicing the pie would be to come to the corner of this building. It's not an accurate, well, it's an accurate representation of it. A person would come up on the corner, right, and they'd just slice in the pie. It's like cutting slices off of a pie, right?
Correct.
That's why it's called slicing the pie.
Correct.
Like you take a little bit off the pie, a little bit more, a little bit more. So eventually you're clearing a little bit at a time. So you're coming here, and you can see what's going on ahead of you. And you would be slicing the pie very slowly.
Correct.
Careful your muzzle. I'm not going to point at you guys. And as you're going further, you're cutting a slice off the pie to go further and further and further. Keep cutting the pie till eventually you could see down the other end of it. Right?
Correct.
That's what slicing the pie is. Military calls it quartering the corner.
Yes, sir.
Because you're taking it off in quarters. But here, if we apply that to this wall, we've got a 4 to 6 foot fenced-in chain link fence in the way. Right?
I mean, there is a fence there, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's there, right?
Yes.
Up here.
You just have to change your dynamics a little bit.
You do, yes, right. Well, we'll talk about that. But in order to get to the corner of this building, Jason, can you display the further one? I think it's 7. In order to get to the corner of that building, which that building's cover, right?
Correct.
To get to the corner of that building, you would have to climb into, because we talk about fatal funnels, right?
Correct.
That would be almost like, that would be a fatal funnel. If someone were to climb into this fenced off building, fenced off area with these AC units, to climb into that is a fatal funnel. Because there's no place to retreat or advance if you're caught in there, right?
Correct. We're focusing on the corner here. I understand the corner, but I'm also going to mention that there was also a vehicle in the parking lot which could have been used for some kind of concealment or cover as well.
I got it. We'll get to that. I'm not there yet.
Okay.
Right? I'm still coming down this building.
Okay.
Because we got to negotiate. Me and you got to negotiate this building first before we can expose ourselves to the open to vehicle. I agree with you on that, but we're not there yet, so we're going to rewind.
Sure.
I'm going to ask my question then again. My question was again, to get to the corner of this building, Mr. Turner's talking about cover, moving tactically in cover. To get to the corner of the building, you'd agree with me that you've got to climb into this caged off area, which looks taller there, 4 to 6 feet tall. Right.
To place yourself up against the building, yes. To still use the theory of slicing the pie, just widen it out and use the fence as your depth of widening and slicing your pie.
We'll talk about that, but I get it. You're right. But if you're going to just avail yourself of the cover, the hard cover, you've got to go into that cage. Right? You agree with that? Not going out wider, we'll talk about that next. To go to that corner, you've got to go into that cage.
I wouldn't say you had to go into the cage looking at how that pipe is inset from the corner of that building there.
I think it's 7. The last one, Jason. Yeah. Sorry, Ranger, it's marked as defense 6. I'm going to put it up on the screen so we can talk about it.
Yes.
So we spoke about the drain pipe, right? So you'd agree with me that this is a different angle. So now this is looking at the building. This is south, looking up to the west, right? It's that one. 6, sorry.
And these are the same corner?
Yeah. Different angle. Well, let's look at it on the screen.
Sure.
So we can...
I just find it to be different, but okay.
Yeah, it is. It's taken later, but it's the same corner, right? Remember we looked at it earlier?
Okay.
It's been offered. It's entered into evidence.
Yes, sir.
So you'd agree with what we're looking at here is it's taken later because you can see the grass has changed, but this is that very same corner west. This is the west side of the building, and this is the south side of the building.
Yes, sir.
Right, and this is that fence.
Okay.
And you'd agree with that fence is because you said, oh, there's the pipe. That fence is. I'm not even going to ask you to estimate how far away that is from the corner of the building.
Okay. Yes, sir.
But you can't. You to get to this slither of brick here, you would have to expose yourself greatly to run back inside to get cover, right?
I wouldn't put myself inside the fenced area, but yes, sir.
Why wouldn't you put yourself inside the fenced area?
Because then I limit myself.
Because you limit yourself. And you limit yourself because if someone were to come around that corner armed with a weapon, bent on your destruction, you would have nowhere to go, right?
Correct.
You would be in a fatal cage, let alone a fatal funnel, right?
Correct.
You would be very vulnerable.
Correct.
And in this case, probably dead, right? Injured.
Could be.
Could be.
Wounded, injured, yes.
Yeah, and of course, you do a very dangerous job, right? Sometimes.
I mean, our job is dangerous, correct. Any job today is dangerous.
Yeah, probably, right. But specifically, being law enforcement is a dangerous job.
Sure.
But if when you're acting as a police officer, you can't help anyone if you're dead.
That's correct.
Right, and so that's why prosecutor talks to you about tactical movement. Officers are trained to move tactically, right?
Correct.
and it's not just so that they can help someone else, right? That's the eventual goal, is to be able to go and help resolve the situation. But it's also to try and keep them alive long enough so that they can resolve the situation.
That's correct.
So let's go back, if we can go back, Jason, to the last one, please. So we confirm this is the corner.
Correct.
Because, and I appreciate your candor, Ranger. You wouldn't have put yourself in that cage.
No, sir.
No. Because I want to talk about how, then, somebody should negotiate that corner. Because I agree with you. There are, so here we are. So what we were looking at there is this corner, right?
Yes, sir.
Right, and the fence, but that was sometimes later.
Yes, sir.
And we know, because there's a wider out photograph, and there's a black SUV. There's been a lot of talk about the black SUV that's in the parking lot, right? That would be potential cover at some point, right?
Correct.
But the problem with that is that you'd have to negotiate an open space to get to it.
That's correct.
No cover, right?
Correct.
And in order to, the whole point of this is the prosecutor asked you about moving tactically. We mentioned that. So to move tactically to this corner here, to be able to, let's place myself on this corner, so that I can, if this is the corner here, and I'm sorry to give you my back, if this is the corner of that building, in order to be able to slice the pie or quarter it, to look what's going on over there, I can't come to the edge of the building, can I?
No, obviously I have to work with the obstacle that's there.
So, and that's what, in this case, right? So, in a purely theoretical or training scenario, wouldn't it be nice just to be able to go down that building?
Sure it would. You always have to prepare yourself and be able to work around obstacles that you come up against.
But in this case, anyone who is trying to get cover from this building would have to negotiate this fenced-off area that you said you wouldn't enter.
That's correct.
So in order to come to the edge of that building, an officer would have to, let's say that the edge of that building is a TV. How wide do you think this caged off area is?
12 feet maybe?
12 feet.
15?
We'll go with it, 12, 15 feet. The officer would have to come 12, 15 feet, let's say, off of that building, right? And you'd agree that would be out of cover, based on the angles. You're widening up that angle of exposure to an area you can't see.
I would take that as wide as I need to be safe for myself to identify my target, of which has been pointed out or has been said is over there.
So let's use my hypothetical earlier. This is the corner of that building, right? But we've got this huge obstruction that's 10, 15 feet wide, right? And it's a big cage that you went into, right?
Correct.
Ideally, you would want to be behind cover, right? Because cover isn't hiding, it's safety, right?
Correct.
Fire. Because there's a rifle being fired somewhere that we don't know where. In order to find it, you'd have to go and look.
Correct.
Right, if you could identify where it's from. But you can't, in my hypothetical here, just come to the corner of the building and have a look, because we've got that cage, which is a fatal funnel on the corner there.
Not only have the cage, I mean, you got other obstacles in the parking lot, as we've seen in the previous photos as well.
I agree. So in order
But
to...
you have a whole open area outside of that to be able to work with, to be able to still use that building and conceal yourself.
With no cover in that parking lot, I got it. But in order to go to that corner, an officer would have to come 10 to 15 metres out, 10 to 15 yards out, which is about 15 yards, I reckon?
10 or 15 or further.
Or further. So to go, if that's my corner there that I've got to try and negotiate now, and quarter or slice the pie, you see I'm further away from that building.
Absolutely.
So I'm already, to try and come to the edge of that building there, I'm hugely exposed from my left-hand side, right?
You can still use that building at your advantage even further out.
But the angles are so much wider, right? Ideally,
Absolutely.
The prosecutor's question was framed that go to the corner of this building here and then start slicing the pie or looking. That is not a possibility on the south side of that building, right?
Not going up next to the building, but to use what is available to you, yes.
I got it. But that, coming to this corner, I'll ask you again. Coming to this corner, tight to this building, in cover, not concealment. Cover, hard cover, is not possible.
Let me ask an answer, Your Honor.
Overruled, you can answer if you understand the question. Frank? I mean, obviously you can't go up to the corner of the building because of the obstacle.
Thank you.
That's where you have to use the remaining room that you have.
You have to use the remaining.
The opening field.
Got it. And so that's right. So basically, to do that, you'd be in an open field, right?
Pretty putting yourself in a position of which you could possibly potentially still identify a target.
Maybe, but in order to do that, you're still hugely exposed in order to do that on this side of the building.
Exposed to a degree.
Exposed.
Exposed to a degree. I mean, yes.
And then, and so I think that we discussed that, that part, and then I think the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is the prosecutor said, would you go in? And you said absolutely.
Sure.
No, we're assuming there that the person is in the building, right?
Correct.
And you're aware that Adrian went in?
No, I'm not aware.
You're not aware? Are you aware that Adrian did enter that fatal funnel?
I'm not aware of that.
Were you aware that Adrian was in that funnel when there were shots fired from a hidden location into the corridor that shot one of his colleagues in the head?
I was not aware
You
of
weren't
that.
aware of that. And were you aware that after one of his colleagues, Adrian's colleagues, had been shot in the head from a person that was out of sight, so they couldn't be seen because you can't shoot what you can't see, right?
Correct.
After his colleague had been shot in the head, he remained in that fatal funnel.
I was not aware of
You
that.
weren't aware of that.
No, sir.
Okay, you're watching live right now the trial in that Uvalde, the former Uvalde police officer who's been charged with dozens of counts there after that shooting at Robb Elementary in 2022. Adrian Gonzalez is in the courtroom. That is not him. The person you are looking at and listening to on the witness stand is Terry Snyder. He is with the Texas Rangers and Texas DPS. He was assigned that day with the task of identifying and removing the bodies that were inside of that school, and then also retrieving and looking at evidence inside the school as well. You hear him giving some testimony about even the ability for officers to respond and what the training that they have teaches them in these moments. So a lot of the questions are kind of in that vein that we hear from the defense as they are cross-examining him at the moment. And so that gives a little bit of context to that case. Again, Gonzalez has pleaded not guilty in this particular case, in which he faces 29 different counts, accused of not doing enough that day at Robb Elementary School. Okay, we want to turn our attention to a court case that is right here in Hampton Roads. This is actually out of Suffolk. We just have breaking news out of Suffolk that a judge there has declared a man not guilty due to insanity when it came to him going into a Suffolk elementary school and then barricading himself inside of a bathroom while children were inside. Okay, in this case, we are talking about Vontrail Thorpe. This happened in June of 2024. People that were there and the police say that Thorpe ran into Kilby Shores Elementary School as students and staff were trying to get into recess, and then he, again, went into a bathroom and would not allow for anyone to get him out or to enter into it. And again, there were children inside of that bathroom at the time. Now, no one was hurt in this. Thorpe was not injured. The children were not injured. This happened in the morning of that day in June of 2024. And this has been a case that has been very interesting moving forward, just in the last week or so. Last week, the trial started in this case, but then the judge then pushed it to Monday so that he could look at the rest of the evidence. And then today we are getting the news out of that case. Our reporter Brianna Fallon in the court, and we'll have a full report later on 13 News Now on all of our platforms, saying that Vontrell Thorpe was found not guilty for abduction and trespassing. The judge apparently said that there was no intent. And so it looks like here that he was actually found guilty for possession of a Schedule 1 or 2 drug on school property. So we do have a guilty verdict there, but not guilty due to insanity for disorderly conduct. So those appear to be the rulings from the judge there in that case of that man in Suffolk, out of Suffolk right now. Okay, we'll get more information and more context, hopefully from Brianna Fallon, when she has her report that comes in, hopefully later on, maybe a 13 News Now at noon, which we're going to go to in just a bit on all of our platforms, or later on at 13newsnow.com here on 13 News Now Plus and over the air 4, 5, and 6. Right now, I want to turn our attention to a pretty cool site, though. As you see there, we have what appears to be a little bit of a eruption going on. This is what, Mount Kilauea. I always mess up the name. We got meteorologist Taylor Stephenson in the house. She snuck in here to talk to us, and it just so happened we came to this screen, and we have, of course, producer Sarah Calloway, who's here as well. All right, Taylor, tell me what I'm looking at. I think this is Kilauea, right?
It's Kilauea.
That's what I thought.
And Kilauea has been erupting for over a year now. I mean, I remember
every time the block is hot in Kilauea.
The block is hot in Kilauea, no pun intended there. But you can see, obviously, lava just streaming from the mountains, from the volcano there. And it's just creating, what I love about this is like the little pathways all that lava is creating. And obviously, you can tell that there's no one around to be in there. So good news is when this is erupting, we're not seeing, obviously, people's homes destroyed in these eruptions. But yeah, I remember when it first erupted, that was like December 2024. And then continuously for the past year plus, we've seen eruptions from this very active volcano.
Yeah, I feel like every time we've shown a volcano erupting, it's been Kilauea over the last, I don't know how, you said year, and it really has been. We've shown it on Daybreak a few different times. And just kind of let you guys know, again, this is live Impact News. This is happening right now. We didn't know this was going to be popping onto our screen here on the big board. Well, we didn't know. But apparently some people that Sarah was listening to knew. You were just telling us that there was someone who predicted that in this window. What were you saying about that? And Taylor, at any point, if you have to walk out because you got 13 News Now Noon, feel free to do so.
Okay.
But Sarah, you were just telling us that off cam. So who predicted this?
The U.S. Geological Survey.
Makes sense.
Yes. So I know this off the top of my head because I produced the weather desk as well. So last week, they were talking about how Kilauea has been erupting on and off since December of 2024. And because of that activity pattern, they've been kind of keeping an eye on it. They predicted, actually, last week, they had predicted that the next eruption was going to happen between January 8th and January 13th. And today is January 12th.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
they were correct, which is pretty cool. I've been, because I do the weather desk, I've been kind of tuned into this, and it was really cool to see that they were right.
That is really cool how science and all of that works together. Not a place that I would want to physically be near, but it is cool to look at as you see the lava just spewing out of it right now. And again, cool to see, but from a distance.
No, for real.
Could be the last thing you see if you get too close. That's for sure. All right, Taylor, I'm going to let you, unless you have anything you want to say about this or the forecast in general, I'm going to let you get prepared for 13 News Now at noon, where we're going to go to in just about 15 minutes. You'll see Taylor. You'll also see Ashley Smith, who's going to be there, too. They'll get you set straight for everything that has to do with what's happening in the news, more obviously likely on that trial that we just got out of Suffolk, and this forecast. Because where it is hot there in Hawaii, at Mount Kilauea or Kilauea, It is not the case right now outside in Hampton Roads. Taylor has a big old...
No.
What is this going... What is this?
It's January. That's what it is. And January is actually back. We had a fake spring. So I'll be talking about how fake spring is no more. And we're right back to wintertime. And maybe when we get a little bit more warmth and then a huge cool down. It's just going to be up and down for the next 7 days. It's a lot of details. So that's why you should tune in at 12 at 13 News Now on air, Channel 13.
All right, certainly we will do so. Okay, Taylor, I'll let you go ahead and go. Right now, let's do this, Sarah. We caught an interview with the Commonwealth's Attorney of Norfolk, and he wanted to share some news, and this was about crime statistics in the city and where they are. We had an interview that we did with him, and there are several cities across Hampton Roads that have seen a trend that we're also seeing across the country, and that is lesser gun violence that is taking place. And so Ramin Fadahi spoke with us, and he shared why this trend appears to be happening, and also he talks about his concerns for the future. So we'll go ahead and let you listen to that, and this ahead of a conversation that we'll be having actually tomorrow right here on the stream with an expert on guns and gun safety and looking at the trends that we've seen across the country. But for now, let's listen to Norfolk's Commonwealth's Attorney Ramin Fadahi about what we're seeing here in the 757.
I have gone back to 1985, and we have never had a homicide number this low since then, and I suspect probably not that low for a couple decades before that. The best year that we had in Norfolk up till 2025 was 2005, where we had 27 homicides. This past year, we had 26. That is excellent news for the city. Absolutely excellent news.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I know there's no crystal ball that's going to tell you what's going to happen the next year or why rates go up or down, but if you had to credit anything, what do you think it was?
Phone's ringing. Do you want to re-ask or just want to answer?
You know the question at this point. Why do you think it was so low this year, past year?
Well, our historic low homicide number has both national causes and local causes. Nationally, we saw huge investments from the Biden administration in childhood poverty, in education, in infrastructure, which produces good blue-collar jobs, and a huge investment in community violence interruption. Locally, we saw the deployment of our police department in smart ways to focus on violent crime. We saw a big investment from the city of Norfolk in Community First and our other community violence interrupters. And we saw the responsible deployment of technology, things like the flock system that allowed the police both to be where they needed to be and solve cases that would not have otherwise been solved. This is a good national story, but it's also a good Norfolk story.
I'm glad you brought up the flock cameras. They're getting a bit notorious at this point, both good and bad. Do you think criminals are aware that, I mean, essentially they're getting caught when they flee?
Well, I can't get into the mind of the average wrongdoer, but I can tell you that one of the biggest ways that we can take a bite out of crime, and one of the only ways that we can deter crime, is by increasing the certainty of being caught. And I go to every murder scene personally, day or night, and I can tell you that I've watched the flock system solve cases that would have gone nowhere in years past. I can also tell you that flock is a privacy and a civil rights enhancer. In past years, if a certain street or a certain neighborhood saw an uptick in violence, the police would just be pulling everybody over in their cars, hassling people, trying to search their cars. None of that happens anymore and doesn't need to. The police are only stopping the cars that are connected to crimes or that themselves are stolen and therefore the object of crimes. So having flock both helps the police arrest people who wouldn't be arrested, and it helps law-abiding citizens not have unnecessary police contacts. It is a positive good.
Now, I'm switching gears a little bit, but you're not the only one that's celebrating a historic low. I think Newport News, they have a presser today at 2 o'clock for literally the same exact story, that they also had a low rate in homicide. Port Hampton cannot say the same thing. They had a particularly rough year. I don't know what the numbers are on that, but is it surprising to you that you're not alone on this, that Hampton Roads seems to be trending downwards in crime?
I'm not surprised that we're seeing generally lower violent crime and homicide rates. This is the product of the national investments that we saw during the Biden administration and with national trends. The FBI started keeping track of crime numbers nationally in 1961. 2025 will almost certainly be the year where, for homicides and violent crime, we will see the lowest number of crimes by population ever recorded. So this is very much a national story. Unfortunately, I don't know that these numbers are going to last. This may be a low watermark for us because the money, for example, that the Biden administration put into community violence interrupters, people like Community First here in Norfolk, the Trump administration zeroed that money out in early 2025. We've seen savage cuts to Medicaid, savage cuts to food stamps, savage cuts to things that promote good blue-collar jobs. So all of these social supports that have been major contributors to this decrease in crime, the Trump administration has knocked out from under everybody. So I hope that we see another good year, but I want to manage expectations. And if people see these numbers go up, remember that it's not because the police forgot how to police, or prosecutors forgot how to prosecute, or city leaders stopped caring. It's because the big macro factors are under attack from Washington.
Now, how many, I'm switching gears a little bit, but do you know the number from last year, how many homicides there were?
Yes.
Or not 2025, 2024.
Oh, I do.
Okay.
So we've seen a huge decrease over the last 4 years. COVID saw a huge spike in violent crime numbers nationally and in Norfolk. We saw a number of 63 homicides the year before I took office in 21, 62 my first year in 2022, 42 in 2023, 37 in 2024, 26 in 2025.
That is a huge downward trend.
It is a huge drop. And by the way, it is a huge drop from historical numbers. You know, most people would think, well, in 1991, things must have been better. We had roughly 90 homicides in Norfolk in 1991. We're down to 26 now. This is another one of the big good news stories over the last 30 years. Homicide rates are a fraction of what they were 30 years ago. By the way, one person who does not deserve any credit for these falling murder numbers is me. I deserve no credit for this, and I want to be very clear about that. Prosecutors do not control the crime rate. We don't control the crime rate any more than weathermen control the weather. What I do take credit for, however, is staying the course. When I came in with those high homicide numbers, people criticized me for being a reformer and believing in criminal justice reform. They pushed me to follow failed 1990s policies, and I refused. No, I pursued criminal justice reform, fewer felony convictions, sentences that were appropriate instead of excessive, no children to adult prison, a reduction in the people on supervision. So I saved hundreds, if not thousands, of years in prison at $60,000 a year, hundreds of people not made felons who didn't need to be felons. And I proved that you didn't need to choose public safety or civil rights, that these were complementary values. So what I'm very proud of is that after 4 years, and after my saying for 4 years, that criminal justice reform and public safety are complementary values, we have the living proof here in Norfolk. That's something that I'm very proud of.
What would you say to the men and women who put on the badge every day and walk around, and they are the ones that are essentially meeting criminals out on the street, and your relationship with the chief of police on this?
I have a lot of admiration for Chief Talbot, our chief of police. He is a very smart, cutting-edge chief and understands how to use the talent in his department. The mid-level supervisors and the men and women who are in patrol cars running patrols are doing good work. They are making do with fewer officers but being more effective than they were in years past. And one of the things I'm proud of is having built a relationship with both the chief and with the police department where we are sharing criminal intelligence. on a weekly, if not daily basis to make sure that we're targeting the people who are dangerous and violent, and therefore being educated about offering breaks and diversion to everybody else. I also want to say a special thank you to Community First, to our violence interrupters, both official and unofficial, and to community organizations like Stop the Violence, who have been out there doing the hard work behind the scenes. It's very hard to measure something that doesn't happen, but we know that they are making a difference and that they are also helping to make our city safer.
My last question, and honestly, I might be talking out of context.
Okay, there you were listening to Norfolk's Commonwealth's attorney, Ramin Fadahi, speaking about lower crime numbers that have happened in the city. He says that haven't happened in a very long time, though he does have concerns about what could potentially happen with fewer resources coming from the federal government, he says, for this upcoming year. But as we talked about that, we actually just got some news from Norfolk Police that there was an officer who was assaulted yesterday. A woman has now been arrested in that case. This happened at a ABC store on Ocean View Avenue around 5